I never imagined my quiet life could fracture in a single evening. My name is George Matthews. At 65, I was comfortably retired after a long career teaching history at Roosevelt High, living with my wife Carol of 42 years in our lakeside bungalow just outside Cleveland. Mornings began with coffee on the porch while Silver Lake mist curled into dawn. Afternoons were spent volunteering at the Historical Society, and evenings found us settled before the fireplace, Carol knitting, me lost in a book. We'd celebrated our 42nd anniversary under the old oak in our yard, string lights glowing, friends gathered, wine flowing, laughter echoing. I believed our life was perfect and unbreakable. Everything changed with small anomalies. One Tuesday night, I awoke to find the kitchen light on. Carol stood at the island, a half-empty glass of red wine before her, unusual for a weekday. Her phone buzzed, displaying the name Liam. She silenced it and slipped the device into her pocket when I entered. "Old colleague," she said, voice clipped. "Just a call about some books." I nodded, but my chest tightened. A few days later, I found a navy blue cocktail napkin embossed with gold letters, The Meridian. Carol's purse lay open on the hall table. When she came home and saw me holding it, she blinked, fingers tightening around her coat's collar. "I must have picked it up at that jazz bar they play at," she said. I didn't mention the text from Liam that had preceded it. Driven by doubt, I followed her the next week as she left for her book club. From my car, I watched her slip into the back entrance of the Meridian Jazz Lounge. Inside, I peered through a side window. There she sat in a shadowed corner with a younger man winding a saxophone case. The band's spotlight flickered across her profile as the music swelled. When the saxophonist handed her a bourbon, their hands brushed, and she laughed. The sound cut deeper than any blade. Stunned, I returned home and sat on the porch until dawn, listening to the night wind. Images of our life together, road trips, our daughter's wedding, quiet evenings by the lake, flashed before me alongside the memory of that laughter. If Carol could betray me for a moment's thrill, what did it mean for the life we'd built? 2 nights later, I steeled myself and followed again. At 7:45 p.m., I traced her path to the lounge and, crouched in the shadows, managed to capture a single photo on my phone, her smiling up at the saxophonist under the blue-tinged lights. His arm wrapped around her waist, her hand rested on his chest. My pulse thundered. I slipped the phone into my pocket and fled into the night. Back in the bungalow, I laid the napkin, a library card, and the photo on the kitchen table. Carol appeared at the doorway, her shoulders slumped. I looked up. "Who is Liam?" I asked. She sank onto a stool, eyes glistening. I'm so sorry," she whispered. Then she's cried out the story: loneliness, a craving for someone to listen, an empty marriage where my books had become more important than her company. She said she never planned to hurt me, that it began as a conversation but became something more. I stood, chair scraping the floor. "I need space," I said, gathering a small suitcase. That night I slept on the couch, Daisy curled at my feet, wondering at the absence beside me. The next morning, I drove to my friend Jim's house and poured out the betrayal over bourbon. "You deserve the truth," he said. "And you deserve to decide what comes next." Within days, I met with our family attorney and signed papers for legal separation, our bungalow listed for sale, joint accounts frozen, and Daisy placed under my sole care. Carol took a cottage by her sister's lake. Our daughter Emily arrived with the grandchildren to help break the news, soft words exchanged over hot cocoa. "Grandma will be back," I promised, though my voice shook. Home felt hollow. I channeled my grief into routines, cataloging Civil War letters at the Historical Society, teaching memoir workshops at the library, walking Daisy along the frosty lakeshore. In the community center's men's support group, I found others wrestling with loss and the prospect of starting over. February brought our first supervised visit. Under Emily's watchful eye, Carol read Treasure Island to Sarah and braided Ben's hair. Their laughter threaded through the room, fragile and hopeful. That evening, back in the empty bungalow, I lit the fireplace and opened my journal. Today, she smiled again. Today, we took a step forward. I closed it with a quiet resolve. As winter thaws into spring, I've sold the bungalow and moved to a smaller cottage beside the lake. Every morning, Daisy and I greet the sunrise. Every afternoon, I teach digital literacy classes for seniors. Carol's visits ebb and flow, some tentative, some warm. And though the path ahead remains uncertain, I know one truth: even after betrayal, a life rebuilt on honesty and care can bloom anew. I woke the next morning in the lakeside cottage with the faint whisper of dawn through the curtains. The bed beside me was empty, save for Daisy's curled form. I poured black coffee into my favorite mug and carried it out onto the small deck overlooking Silver Lake. The mist rose like pale ghosts over the water, and in that quiet moment I steeled myself for what came next. That afternoon I drove into town to meet with Linda Hart, our family attorney. Her office smelled of polished wood and old legal volumes. We reviewed the separation agreement. The lakeside bungalow would be sold, proceeds divided, our joint accounts frozen, Daisy placed under my sole guardianship, Carol to receive temporary support for her cottage rent. I signed the papers with a hand that trembled just slightly, each line a mark in the ledger of our shared life now unshared. Back at the cottage, I unpacked a cardboard box labeled Carol's Books, setting aside her favorite novels so I could donate the rest to the community library. Daisy nosed through the box, curious as I carefully removed each volume and stacked it on the porch railing. One by one, I closed that chapter of our story. Late that evening, I received my first invitation for Carol's supervised visit. The court had ordered that our daughter, Emily, would host. On Friday at 3, I would bring Daisy and Sarah and Ben to their apartment. I replayed the moment in my mind, how her eyes might dart away, how I would sit and pretend everything was normal for the children's sake. Friday came with a soft spring rain. I loaded Daisy into the car, along with Sarah's school bag and Ben's soccer ball. Emily greeted us in a bright foyer scented with lilies. Behind her, Carol stood, coat damp, eyes guarded but determined. The grandchildren shouted, "Grandma," and charged forward, and Carol's expression softened as she scooped them up. Daisy wagged her tail between us. For that hour, we sat on the living room floor. Carol read aloud from the Chronicles of Narnia, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. Sarah traced the illustrations with her finger, and Ben asked endless questions about tree spirits and talking animals. I watched them, my heart heavy yet hopeful. This time together, though mediated, felt like reclaiming a small piece of our former family. When the hour ended, I led Daisy outside. Carol waved from the window. Emily pressed my shoulder. "You did the right thing," she whispered. I nodded, breathing deeply. The sting of separation still ached, but in those children's laughter I heard a promise of healing. The following week, I returned to my volunteer work at the Historical Society with renewed focus. Each letter I catalogued, each photograph I scanned, felt like another building block in reconstructing my identity outside of marriage. I also rejoined the men's support group on Thursday nights. In a circle of folding chairs, we shared griefs and small triumphs, a standing ovation at a grandchild's school play, the first sale of a home one had once shared, the courage to love again. March brought brighter days. I sold the bungalow at a fair price and found the cottage more than adequate, a place of new beginnings. I painted the walls off-white, added a small reading nook by the window, and planted daffodils along the walkway. Each breeze that stirred their blooms felt like an ember of hope. Meanwhile, Carol's visits began to shift. The judge granted her one unsupervised 2-hour Saturday afternoon each month, provided she remained in therapy. On March's first Saturday, Emily helped set up the cottage's back patio with chairs and soft blankets. Carol arrived bearing muffins, blueberry for Sarah, chocolate chip for Ben. They ran to her, Daisy danced between their legs, and I retreated inside, reading by the window until Carol called, "Dinner's ready." I joined them at the table, pancakes we cooked together, laughing at Ben's syrup-covered grin. For a moment, old patterns flickered to life, but tempered by the new boundaries we'd set. One evening, after everyone had gone, I found a note from Carol tucked under my coffee mug. "Thank you for giving me a chance to show I can be better. I'm working on myself, for the children and for us." I folded it carefully and tucked it into my journal, a tangible sign that her remorse was real. By April, our co-parenting arrangement had found a fragile stride. Emily coordinated a shared digital calendar, color-coding dad days in green, supervised visits in yellow, and unchaperoned Saturdays in blue. On a Tuesday, I collected the children from school, while Carol returned them for a Friday afternoon session. Communications were polite, focused on logistics. Yet beneath the platitudes, the undercurrent of possibility rippled. We were learning to care for each other's feelings again, even as we kept our distance. Spring's full warmth arrived in May, and with it came the midterm court review. Linda and I prepared a binder of progress, notes from supervised visits, a letter from Dr. Ramirez confirming Carol's attendance at therapy, and reports on the children's emotional well-being. In Judge Freeman's courtroom, Carol and I sat apart, flanked by Emily and Linda. The judge commended our efforts and granted Carol 2 unsupervised afternoon visits per month, contingent on continued therapy. Carol exhaled, relief shining in her eyes. She mouthed, "Thank you," and I returned a nod that carried both caution and hope. That evening, I updated the calendar on my cottage's fridge, adding the new dates. Daisy licked my hand as I penciled in May's Saturday visits. In that small, simple act, I felt the contours of a life in motion, a life where trust could be rebuilt one honest conversation at a time. As summer approached, I taught a special history class at the library, local legends of Silver Lake, and Carol attended with the grandchildren, sitting in the back row, notebook in hand. We shared glances across the podium, neither of us speaking but acknowledging that we were forging a new chapter together. And so, in the wake of betrayal, our family repaired itself through structure, empathy, and the quiet persistence of ordinary days. While the cracks in our marriage remained, they no longer threatened collapse. Instead, they served as pathways toward truth. Each step, legal, emotional, familial, built a road to whatever lay beyond, guided by a father's love and a husband's willingness to try again. That July morning, the first true heat of summer settled over the cottage, and Daisy and I woke to birdsong and sunlight spilling through the curtains. I poured my coffee and stepped out onto the small deck, inhaling the scent of blooming phlox. Today was one of Carol's unchaperoned Saturday visits, 2 precious hours each month the court had granted her, and I felt a cautious hope in my chest as I set the table with fresh fruit and muffins. At precisely 10 o'clock, I heard Emily's car pull into the driveway. She guided Sarah and Ben to Carol's outstretched arms. The grandchildren squealed as Carol scooped them up, Daisy dancing around their feet. I poured orange juice into tall glasses and offered Carol a cup of coffee. She smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that warmed me more than any sunbeam. We spent the morning in easy conversation. Carol asked about my volunteer workshops at the library, I asked about her therapy sessions. Sarah and Ben chattered over blueberry muffins, then dashed off to explore the flower beds. For 2 hours, we kept the old rhythms alive, reading poems in the hammock, comparing notes on Daisy's latest antics, while respecting the new boundaries we'd set. When the visit ended, Carol hugged the children and thanked me. "Thank you for this," she said quietly. I shrugged. "They're our world." She nodded, tears glinting, then climbed into Emily's car. I watched until the tail lights vanished down the lane, then closed the door and exhaled, the cottage suddenly still. That afternoon, I decided to fill the hours with purpose. I drove to the local library and shelved new donations of local memoirs, a task I had once done alongside Carol. As I worked, I found myself missing her presence but also appreciating the freedom to reorganize my own life. I helped a veteran named Joe scan old photographs. He told stories of his youth and thanked me for preserving memory. In their voices, I found renewed meaning. Over the next weeks, my routine settled into a rhythm of growth. Mornings I walked the lakeshore, Daisy at my side, the sunrise painting the water gold. I jotted thoughts into my journal, reflections on healing and hope, and traced the arc of my days with gratitude that, though my marriage had cracked, it had not been fully broken beyond repair. Afternoons, I led the library's digital literacy workshop for seniors. One woman, Margaret, arrived timidly with her dusty laptop. Together we navigated email, and her face lit when she sent her first message to a granddaughter. Applause rippled through the room. I realized that teaching others to connect digitally mirrored the work Carol and I were doing to reconnect emotionally. Evenings I reserved for reflection and planning. I pored over the family calendar, color-coded for dad days, visits, and my own volunteering. I marked the dates for our next court review, our upcoming family picnic at the lakeside park, and the annual 4th of July fireworks. Each entry felt like a step on the path forward. One humid August afternoon, I met Irene for coffee at the bookstore cafe where she volunteered. Irene, 64 and ever curious, had begun attending my memoir workshops to research her family history. Over spiced chai, we compared notes on 19th-century diaries and laughed over my clumsy attempts at interpreting old handwriting. As the weeks passed, our friendship deepened. We took walks through the farmers' market, exchanged book recommendations, and shared stories of children and grandchildren. On a warm September evening, Irene invited me to a poetry reading at the library. We sat side by side as local writers shared verses of love, loss, and renewal. When the lights came up, she brushed a stray hair from her face and said, "Thank you for coming with me." I felt a gentle shift in my heart, a reminder that new connections could bloom even amid old scars. Meanwhile, Carol's visit steadily improved. By October, she was attending soccer games with Ben and school plays with Sarah without a chaperone, her laughter blending with the crowd's cheers. Each successful visit, marked by photos sent through our shared calendar, wove stronger threads between her and the grandchildren. In return, I maintained firm boundaries, ensuring that our time with Carol remained stable and predictable for the children's sake. That autumn, we hosted our first family and friends harvest gathering at the cottage. Carol and Irene both arrived, Carol carrying a pumpkin pie, Irene cradling a selection of heirloom apples. Emily and her family filled the yard with laughter and light. We roasted corn, passed around cider, and watched Sarah and Ben carve jack-o'-lanterns alongside Daisy, who pranced among fallen leaves. As I stood with Carol and Irene by the picnic table, I realized that our once broken circle had expanded to include new love, new traditions, and a renewed sense of family. In the months that followed, I continued to balance the old and the new, tending Daisy and the cottage garden, guiding seniors through digital frontiers, sharing quiet evenings with Irene, and supporting Carol's steady journey back into our family's life. Each sunrise over Silver Lake brought fresh promise, each sunset gratitude for the day's small triumphs. And though our story began with betrayal, it transformed into a testament that hearts can mend, relationships can evolve, and life, even after 65, can offer surprising and beautiful second acts. That December, snow dusted the lake's edge in pale crystals as I drove Carol, Sarah, and Ben to our final court hearing. The courthouse, its marble steps swept clean of ice, stood like a sentinel over our shared past. I carried Daisy's leash in one hand and the binder of co-parenting reports in the other. Inside, Emily sat with us, a quiet pillar of support. Judge Freeman entered and, after brief introductions, reviewed our progress, Carol's completion of therapy, the positive notes from supervised and unsupervised visits, the children's school counselor reports on their emotional resilience. She noted how Carol had demonstrated consistent commitment to rebuilding trust, and how George had provided stability and support. Given the documented improvements and the best interests of the minor grandchildren, Judge Freeman declared, "I grant expanded parenting time. Carol may have overnight visits one weekend per month, and every Wednesday evening from 5 to 8. All previous arrangements remain in place." The gavel's echo sounded like both an ending and a beginning. Outside the courtroom, Carol's arm linked in mine, we walked into the late afternoon light. Emily and the kids flanked us, Sarah clutching her homework folder, Ben brandishing a toy dinosaur. Daisy bounded ahead, tail a metronome of excitement. Carol pressed my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." At home, I updated the family calendar one last time, adding Carol's new overnight weekends in purple ink. As I penciled in our first Wednesday dinner together, pasta and steamed vegetables, Daisy nosed my elbow in approval. That Friday evening, Carol arrived at the cottage with a suitcase and a thermos of hot cider. The grandchildren greeted her with squeals, and I watched as Carol tucked into the couch beside them, reading a bedtime story. Later, she and I sat by the fire with mugs of cider. "I never thought we'd come this far," she said, voice soft as the flames. "I'm grateful for second chances." I nodded. "We both earned this." Over the following winter months, our blended holiday traditions took shape. On Christmas Eve, we attended the candlelight service together, Carol at my side, Irene in the front pew alongside Emily and the grandchildren. Afterwards, we returned to the cottage for hot cocoa and gingerbread, Daisy prancing beneath the tree. New Year's brought a family brunch, pancakes for the kids, jazz music. Carol and I once loved playing softly in the background, and friends gathered in laughter. Irene raised her glass in a toast, to resilience, love, and new beginnings. I clinked my mug to hers and realized that life's second act was brighter than any I could have imagined at 67. In the quiet of late January, I sat at my desk overlooking the frozen lake and opened my journal to the final entry. I lost half my life to betrayal, but in doing so, I found the other half waiting to be lived. Love can fracture and yet still heal, stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than before. With Carol, with Irene, with Emily and the grandchildren, and with Daisy ever by my side, I step forward into each new dawn grateful for the chance to rebuild a family founded on honesty, kindness, and the enduring belief that life's greatest gifts often emerge from its deepest trials. I closed the journal, the late winter light soft on its cover. Outside, Silver Lake held its promise of reflection and renewal. And as I stepped onto the porch, Daisy at my heels and Carol's warmth beside me, I knew our story was not about an ending, but about the ongoing art of choosing connection, day after day, season after season.